Kirito gasped and faltered, falling onto his knees and holding onto Agatha's bed. He started crying, finally coming to terms with the reality he was forced into. He wanted to see them, Sugua, his mother, father, but he couldn't. That was no longer allowed. There was only one reality he was allowed to see now, and that was the reality of this world. Perhaps real tears were falling down on his cheeks as his body lay on the bed, with Sugua watching over him in person. As he continued to cry, a soft hand touched his head, trying to comfort him, and the gentle caressing of the little hand never stopped moving until the crying ended. It was an unusual night for Kirito. After the death of his first non-official party member, who had attempted to monster PK him to steal the quest item for the Anneal Blade, Kirito's memories were hazy. He had completed the miracle remedy of the forest and then, facing his new reality, cried for a long time in the back room where the daughter of the quest NPC was waiting for her elixir, who reminded him of Sugua, his adoptive sister in the real world. At some point, he had made his way to an inn room, and it wasn't a comfortable 4 to 5 hours of sleep given the events of the previous day. When he finally woke up, he couldn't find the strength in him to get out of the room, and the last thing he needed was to encounter more people who should be slowly arriving in the village of Horunka. What he did not expect, however, was one of those people finding the only player in town in his private inn room.
安心しろ。
The person outside of the door spoke again, trying to ensure they were not there for some shady business. At 7 AM in the morning, randomly knocking on his door, Kirito was naturally not very convinced by the attempt of the person trying to explain themselves. Indoors were technically protected by the anti-criminal code of Aincrad. They were indestructible system objects and could only be opened by the person renting the room. But Kirito was on his guard. He did not want to find himself in the clutches of death for the second time within 24 hours of the beginning of the death game. He grabbed his Anneal blade and moved himself next to the door, to the side that the door could not be slammed onto him. "Who's there?" he asked. The person outside introduced themselves as Argo.
アルゴだよ。よろしくな。
Kirito felt the name was familiar but could not exactly be sure. As he pondered though, the person caught him off guard by stating there was something they wanted to buy off of him. He was particularly stumped because the game had just begun less than a day ago. So far, Kirito had store-bought equipment and no accessories to speak of in his inventory. All he had was the Anneal blade he earned yesterday, almost getting killed in the process. And that one item he did not intend to sell. But it was worrisome that they knew he had the Anneal blade in the first place. The only person who would was Copper, and he was no longer around. So he decided to play along with the negotiations and try to fish out information about where they may have learned it from. He unlocked the door and told the figure to wait 5 seconds before entering the room. He slowly moved away from the door with his grip firm on the Anneal blade, and 5 seconds later, on the dot, a petite figure with light leather armor and a sand yellow hooded cape entered with a casual
Yo.
Kirito quickly checked their cursor. Green. This was indeed not an NPC, but a player, and while they were not an orange player, it was never a guarantee of safety, as Kirito learned just yesterday. The person introduced themselves as Argo and took a seat, clearly urging Kirito to relax himself, but he was quite tense and decided to be hasty, immediately asking how much the hooded person was offering. It was time for the visitor to be confused this time around, as Argo had not even mentioned what they wanted to buy in the first place. And when Argo pointed that out, it was now a room full of confusion. Kirito lifted up the Anneal blade in his offhand to showcase it, to which Argo replied with the fact that they did not even use one-handed swords. But when prompted to by Kirito, Argo simply refused to share her build as it was a valuable intel. And at that moment, Kirito quickly realized he had just given away his biggest trump card to a random person who may or may not have been here to ambush him. Lucky for him though, Argo quickly brushed his awkwardness aside, especially after having failed to recognize she was a female player from her looks or her voice, and stated her intentions. While she was not after the Anneal Blade itself, she wanted to obtain info on the quest that rewarded the Anneal Blade, as it was bound to be a popular one with the beta testers and very helpful for newcomers. When Kirito asked how she knew about the quest and whether she was a beta tester too, emphasis on the two, the girl grinned again, stating that she never once insinuated that he was a beta tester in the first place. It wasn't hard to figure out Kirito was not very good at being careful with his information. As they pondered about the layout of the first floor that they both seemed quite familiar with, the face of the girl grabbed his attention when she finally took off her hood. Her face was marked with 3 lines on both cheeks, whiskers to be specific, and it appeared they were painted with some pretty high quality dye, fairly expensive for the second day of launch. "What's up with the whiskers?" Kirito asked. He was mildly disappointed by the fact that Argo was not even role-playing as a cat by throwing meows in her sentences, the mention of which seemed to really push your buttons. She shot up straight, quite annoyed, telling him it was rat whiskers. In her frustration, she also berated Kirito that within a week, everyone would know the name of the famous info broker Argo. The frustration of the girl was filled with information for the first time, but before Kirito could process any of it, the girl finally asked him for his name. Surprisingly for Kirito, Argo was not searching for him by name despite literally appearing at his door. She was specifically searching for the super dasher ass who went and cleared the Anblade quest on the very first day out of nowhere, as a direct quote. Assuming the player would call it a day after that adventure, all she did was look at the booking window of the inn's front desk. She mentioned she had her suspicions, of course, whether it would be the player she was looking for, but lucky for her, Kirito kinda ended up shoving it at her face when she first stepped into the room, prompting another mental note from Kirito to stop bleeding vital information to random people. But that still left a question to be answered. How did she know that someone had cleared the miracle remedy of the forest quest in the first place? The house of the quest giver was an instanced area. If anyone else had gotten there after Kirito, they'd just find the mother and her sick child all over, with no way to tell whether someone had even picked up the quest, let alone cleared it. But therein lied the truth of why she was searching for information. Argo stated it was changed from the beta, and most probably that was not the only change in the quest, nor was it the last one in Aincrad. There was now a 24-hour cooldown on the quest, but before explaining him any more, she once again shot back at the swordsman to finally spout his name, which reminded Kirito that he had failed to do so still. The boy remained puzzled for a second because his tag, Kirito, was a short version of his real name, Kirigaya Kazuto. He was feeling a bit awkward but found it implausible that Argo would figure out his real name.
俺はキリト。
So for a moment, when Argo's eyes really shined when he introduced himself as Kirito, his breath got stuck. But she quickly asked whether he was the Kirito that managed to catch a glimpse of the 10th floor boss before the beta ended. It was true, in the final seconds of the beta period, he was able to get a final rush through the halls of the Castle of a Thousand Serpents and managed to read the name of the floor boss before he was enveloped in white and promptly logged out. Kagachi the Samurai Lord waited for them at the first milestone floor. But before revealing yet another secret, he decided to not confirm whether he was really that Kirito or not, and at last, the duo managed to sit down and start talking business. Argo essentially wanted 2 pieces of info from him. One, a detailed rundown of the miracle remedy of the forest quest, and secondly, the base stats of the Anneal Blade. She offered 200 core for the info, which Kirito, in his infinite wisdom, took a second before realizing you're giving me this much just for that wasn't the best way to haggle, and managed to add whether she'd be willing to give him a freebie piece of information on top. The reason for the whiskers, however, was not Argo's fancy, so the deal for the freebie fell apart. While Argo, who had not confirmed whether she was a beta tester or not, should have known the contents of the quest just fine if she played the beta, but she highlighted that the beta contents were exactly why she wanted to hear the quest details from Kirito. She figured that a game that had an extensive beta period had a big Achilles heel. The extensive knowledge from the beta, which could make the first 10 floors a breeze and potentially open up a huge power delta between beta testers and newbies. And Kayaba had already announced that he would be watching the progress with joy. But it certainly would not be all that enjoyable if 1,000 players just steamrolled the entire beginning portion. However, on the flip side, Kayaba couldn't also just dispose of the beta testers. That would go against the ideal he had explained during his speech. But small changes here and there, changes just enough to maintain the fairness of the game, but keep the beta testers on their toes at all times, preventing them from blasting through. And that's when Kirito recalled the previous night, when he was hunting little Nepenthes with Copper. During the beta, he had never heard of the flower heads required for the quest item and fruit heads that were the trap variant spawning at the same time. That was the kind of pitfall Argo was talking about that may spell doom for unsuspecting beta testers. And she wanted to collect all the beta info as well as the changes in the full game into a guidebook and share it with the newbies to help people settle and explore safely. The Anneal Blade, after all, could last a player up until floor 4 or even 5 if they were regularly enhancing it, and she wanted to make sure people could farm the quest safely without anyone dying. Someone has already died, Kirito thought, recalling the prior night, but kept his mouth shut. Hearing Argo's reasons, of course, he also agreed to not charge for his information at all. Argo apologized for playing into his conscience, but clearly was not sorry and immediately broke into her usual snickering. In the next 20 minutes, Kirito shared every piece of information from his first day alongside the stats of the Anneal Blade. Before she left, she knocked on the door with a specific rhythm. That would be her signature knock for her future visits to Kirito. While it did surprise him that Argo would be visiting him more often in the future supposedly, she simply smirked as a response and stated she would not want to let go of a valuable source of info and that he should not screw up and die on her before she rushed off back to the village. It was already 8:30 in the morning. Kirito wanted to leave Horunka before any other players showed up. He was going around grabbing easy quests, but he recalled a particularly rewarding quest on the outskirts of the village at a farm. Just when he approached the quest giver farmer NPC, Argo called out to him. She wanted to tag along for the quest, fearing a similar cooldown like the Anneal Blade one. So they decided to test it out. They first needed to test whether there'd be a cooldown, so there was no need to form a party just yet. If there was no cooldown, they could just continue solo after all. Kirito approached the farmer and asked whether something was bothering him, one of the key phrases to use on NPCs with an exclamation mark on their head. He responded that he needed help finding one of his cows that went missing, and when Kirito accepted, the exclamation mark turned into a question mark indicating a quest in progress. He didn't bother checking the quest log or the quest name and immediately turned over to Argo. However, the self-proclaimed info broker was correct in her assumptions. At the exact same moment, the question mark disappeared for her, and any attempts to ask the NPC whether everything was alright was met with a "Could you please see me again at around 3 o'clock in the afternoon," indicating a 6-hour cooldown. As promised, Kirito sent Argo a party invite and the duo set off to tackle the quest together. The Stray Calf quest, as it was known in the beta, was relatively straightforward. One of the calves of the farmer had run away and you needed to find her and bring her back. But unlike a typical escort mission, to find the calf, you needed to bring her mommy cow with. The annoying part was that the mommy cow was quite the tempered animal NPC that required you to regularly give her treats in the form of a rock salt. In a traditional MMORPG, there'd probably be a gauge to keep the temperament in check, but since Full Dive was much more immersive, there were equally immersive solutions. In this case, the cow would start wagging its tail more and more furiously the closer she was to throwing a hiss fit. When encountering enemies, it could get hard to keep track of the timer, at which point the mommy cow would simply run away in the opposite direction, impeding progress. For that reason alone, Kirito was kinda glad he did not have to do it solo. As they progressed through the quest and fought together on the field, Kirito was particularly curious about why this girl, who referred to herself as the big sis in a cheeky way, was using claws of all weapons in the first place. He had tried them in the beta, but he had found them quite intimidating due to their extremely short reach, requiring the player to basically get face to face with the monsters. He asked Argo, but of course, she responded that the answer to that would cost him 100 core, so Kirito spent most of his time grunting, trying to figure out the reason on his own. The forest wasps they were regularly facing were a higher difficulty version of the typical yellow wasps found on floor 1 around the town of beginnings. They had trickier attack patterns, and instead of a paralysis shot, they possessed a ranged venom shot, making it unfavorable to block with weapons due to the corrosive effects and the ability to inflict a poison debuff. The duo was very capable though, easily working through the wasps, but it only reminded Kirito the day before when he was having a good time with Klein, the brazen, hot-headed personality with a curved blade that he left behind. He still feared about his fate. Klein was added in his friends list and he could confirm whether he was still alive just by sending out a message. But the fear of encountering the dreaded "a player by this name could not be found" message was just too much. Argo was worried seeing the energetic boy fall into an aura of despair in front of her eyes. Simply asking what was up snapped the boy out of his trance, to which he answered with a question of his own. "Argo-san, what prompted you to become an info broker? I don't really think you're going to turn all that much of a profit doing this job, and you won't be able to find as much time for your own leveling when you're busy gathering info or compiling guidebooks, no?" Argo had to groan for receiving such a personal question. She offered Kirito 3 potential answers to choose from. One for free, one for 100 core, and another for 100k core. Kirito found the last option to be way too overinflated and decided for the free answer just to get a hint. Argo simply stated that she figured she'd eventually be able to turn a profit, talking about her plans to hire some helpers and even starting up a newspaper in Aincrad later down the line, but she did not forget to add that this was only the free answer. She tried to tease Kirito that he could still go for the 100 core answer, which he classily refused with the excuse of not wanting to pay to pry into her heart. As Argo continued to tease him that he was finally learning how to talk to a lady, the mommy cow was slowly getting annoyed, wagging her tail furiously. As Kirito rushed to the cow to give her a treat, he swore to himself that one day he'd save up 200,000 core and purchase both the true reason for her becoming an info broker and the reason for the whiskers. The duo only faced 3 more monster waves on their path close to their goal. Further ahead was the large plains area, with the middle of it being wetlands filled with the most dangerous basic monster of the floor, the kobold, so they had to pay attention not to steer too close there. And further ahead to the north side of the plains were giant cliffs separating floor 1 into its southern area where Town of Beginnings and Horunka were, and on the north side Tolbana and the floor 1 dungeon. To go through, players had 3 options: cliffs to the east, caves to the west, and a central canyon with a boar type field boss. That would be a challenge for another day, of course. Kirito was snapped out of his train of thought by Argo offering him some drinks. Of course, Aincrad was a death game now, and especially after the encounter from the previous day, Kirito could not afford blindly trusting a person like that again. Could easily have been a paralysis drink after all. But seeing his expression, Argo apologized for the obvious situation and mixed his drink with hers as a sign of trust. It was a limoncello you'd often find in Italy. While it was an alcoholic drink, it of course meant nothing in the virtual world of Aincrad. After some bickering about even the mighty self-proclaimed info broker not being able to find ice though in this world, and Argo taking this as a challenge to deliver upon one day, the duo finally returned to the stray calf quest at hand. As they got closer to the target area where the calf was supposed to be, the mummy cow sounded off with a as expected and started running to the precise location, with Kirito and Argo chasing behind to reach the calf. But mummy cow suddenly came to a stop, and that was not part of the beta. Another rather scared moo sound came from in front of them. When Argo and Kirito finally had a look, they saw the calf tied up with a rope and taken away by another humanoid figure. Kirito immediately yelled at the small man, prompting him to turn around, and as soon as the man did, or rather it did, fear took its place in both Kirito and Argo's eyes. A kobold. For a level 5 player like Kirito, even the weakest variant of Kobold would be a deadly challenge this early on. Kirito instinctively looked up at its cursor, which for monsters was a gradient of red depending on its relative difficulty to the player. Light red for easy matchups, but a dark blood red for the swamp kobold rat hunter standing in front of them. He quickly asked Argo for her level, and her quickly answering level 3 without charging any core only showed the urgency of the situation. But she was dead set on earning as much information as possible. If other unsuspecting players were to pick up the quest, they would not be lucky enough to have a beta veteran swordsman and the nimblest info broker around them for help. They would surely die. Kirito acknowledged her resolve and took up his stance to challenge the kobold, trusting Argo the Rat to be capable of fending off the attacks just fine. But that resolve immediately broke down when more rustling sounds came from behind the soul kobold. Two new ones appeared, another swamp kobold rat hunter, and more alarmingly, a much larger figure, swamp kobold trapper, the most dangerous kobold variant featured in the wetlands. Every beta tester had tasted death at least once to this variant back in the beta, who appeared with a dark crimson color cursor indicating an almost impossible opponent to beat. Kirito immediately commanded Argo to start running away, but she interjected, reminding him of the trapper's attack. The moment you turned your back on them, they would use their rope to target your weapon and snatch it away. When you tried to grab it, hell would rain down upon you. But Argo had a plan. Her claws came in a pair. She ordered Kirito to run away ahead instead, and if one of her claws would get caught by the rope attack, she could at least cut the rope with the other claw. But if the rope managed to catch her instead, the rat hunters would immediately drain her HP. Kirito yelled he'd take care of the rat hunters, only receiving more protest from Argo in return, but they both stopped, now looking at the kobold trapper. He was almost in range for his rope attack, and it was spinning up already. A meter. They needed to commit to a decision now. Half a meter. Fight or flight. It was now or nothing. A step away from range. Unlike the duo, their unlikely partner had already made up her mind, and with a mad rush, Mummy Cow charged right at the swamp kobold trapper and rammed straight into it, sending it flying away and bursting it into polygons in the air. With the Mummy Cow officially becoming the leader of the group, Argo and Kirito steeled their resolve and tackled the kobold rat hunters. The ranch owner was thrilled to have his calf back safe and sound, delivering the promised core alongside a mysterious basket. With the XP bonus, Argo was now level 4 and Kirito now level 6. The duo were surprised that the quest was changed in such a drastic way, but the observant info broker ended up being disappointed in herself that she never realized it beforehand. Kirito was confused by Argo's disappointment, of course, who was looking at her quest log. The quest they had just completed, it was not titled The Stray Calf, but was renamed into The Revenge of the Cow, an apt name for a quest that ended with the Mummy Cow ramming the impossible enemy facing them. If they had only checked the title beforehand. Kirito decided to have a look into the basket. In it were 2 loaves of bread and a small jar that contained cream in it. The Stray Calf, or rather the Revenge of the Cow quest, was a repeatable one, so if one was a fan of the cream, they could just redo the quest after the cooldown period for more. Kirito, however, saw no use whatsoever for the delicacy he held in his hand and offered it to Argo instead, but the rat refused the offer and told him to keep it. If you can't bring yourself to eat it, then maybe next time you come across some depressed player, cheer them up with that. Just give them something tasty and get them back on their feet. Before Kirito could understand how important of a tip that may end up being, the info broker bid him farewell and ran towards the plaza.
All things considered,
Kirito had actually forgotten to share his guess as to why Argo had chosen claws as her weapon in the first place. He stood up slowly from where he was sitting. Was it because it was effective against the Kobold Trapper's rope attack? Nah, that was too specific. But was still worth a shot to test that theory the next time they meet, whenever that would be. But until that time, there were more quests to be cleared. He started heading north and put the cream into his inventory, completely oblivious to when it may be helpful in the future. And that was Sword Art Online the next day, published as a Japanese limited edition release in a specific week of the Ori of a Starless Night movie in theaters. Maybe one day it will receive official serialization in a main series side story compilation, but it's likely a decade away at this point. The story is similar to SAO Cordial Cores that I also covered on my channel, where it is really a dialogue and information heavy story, as well as a ton more references to the past and to the future than I managed to fit in this story of the past video. I had to trim out a lot of them. In fact, feel free to share every single reference you catch down in the comments, even obscure ones like the ice cube. I particularly enjoy how this story is just a chill and fun little excursion covering Kirito's first meeting with Argo, and how the one super tense moment is just a build up for a mad cow rush. I hope you enjoyed it. It's a really nice little story. The story that comes after this is the Scherzo movie bonus, Sword Art Online The Seventh Day, which actually covers the cave that Kirito mentioned in this story that takes you towards Tolbana, again featuring Argo, and shortly after that story is when Progressive Ori of a Starless Night begins. Lastly, I want to thank the SAO Wikia and my old and recent friends there for being a great community over the years, as well as thank you for watching and sharing your kind words and support with me over the years, even at my most unreliable times. Thank you very much, and stay cool.